Chapter 17. The Fragile Space. The cold of many winters lives in your knuckles now. Each morning, you wake to a familiar ache in your hands, a deep-set chill that no fire can fully chase away. Your back is a map of the times you've knelt by a sickbed, the times you've hauled water from the well, the long years of bending and lifting. From the door of your small cottage, you look out over the village, nestled in the valley like a sleeping child. Sometimes, the herbs and charms are not the true cure. The real healing, the one that works in the silent, dark places of the body, comes from the clean water you insist the boy drinks, from the warm, nourishing broth you will teach the family to make from bone and root. It comes from the way you clean the wound with the sharp purity of wine and bind it with linen, boiled free of the world's grime. Much of your work is simply providing the body with what it needs to fight its own war. Cleanliness, rest, nourishment. But your failures are mourned in private, a collection of scars on your soul. This is the unseen toll of caregiving. The healer doesn't just mend bodies, they absorb the trauma of their community. Their memory becomes an archive of pain. So ask yourself, when your only purpose is to hold back the tide of death, what happens when you feel yourself drowning in the memory of those it has already taken? The priest remains in his archway, a silent judge in a world where your survival depends entirely on his verdict. The priest, walking from the church, sees the exchange. He sees your pouch of herbs and moss. His knowledge comes from a book that condemns the serpent's wisdom. He doesn't see a healer. He sees a woman whose power does not flow from his altar, whose authority was not granted by a man in robes. To them, a woman who can coax a life into the world or halt the flow of blood can surely do the reverse. If you can bless a womb, can you not also curse it? Ask yourself, which is the more comforting thought when your child is dying? That this plant contains a specific, impersonal chemical compound that may or may not work? Or that God Himself left you this leaf, shaped like the very organ that is failing, as a personal promise of His care? But the fundamental fear, the cold primal knowledge that an invisible, untouchable threat can unmake our lives in a moment, that remains perfectly, hauntingly intact. We need fire, you say, and the cleanest water you can draw. You send the father to the well, and the mother to boil the water until it shrieks. While they work, you unspool a strip of precious linen, not from the common chest, but from your own small, private store, a piece you boiled yourself under the last full moon. You pour a splash of thin, sour wine into a wooden bowl. It is a waste of good drink, they think. But you know it is the price of a life. But for you, she is the memory of your own powerlessness, the face of a sickness for which you had no name. These are your ghosts. You don't speak of them, but they are there when you search for herbs in the woods, their stories clinging to the leaves and roots you gather. The willow bark is for fever, but it is also for Amen. The raspberry leaf is for birth, but it is also for the silent blue baby. Your successes are celebrated by the village, a communal joy that papers over the cracks of fear. The difference between being a healer and being a heretic is not a matter of intent or outcome, but of permission. It is a reminder that hums beneath the surface of your life, constant as the river. Knowledge that grows from the ground up, from the hands of the common, is always a threat to power that claims to come from the heavens down. Ask yourself, When one man holds the only key to salvation, does he fear for your soul, or does he fear you might find another door? You work with a quiet competence that is both reassuring and, to some, deeply unsettling. The bleeding stops. A life, which God seemed ready to claim, is held back by your hands, by the earth wisdom you possess. As you leave, the man's wife presses a small, misshapen loaf of bread into your hands. It is their treasure. But across the muddy track, another woman watches you. Her prize piglet died just last week, its belly swollen and strange. She looks from your hands, the same hands that just saved her neighbor, to her empty sty, and her grief curdles into suspicion. We can explain that a plant's efficacy lies in alkaloids and flavonoids, in interactions we can only see under a microscope. But in gaining that knowledge, we have lost a language. We have lost that sense of a hidden, living dialogue with the world around us. We see a plant and we classify it. They saw a plant and perceived its soul, its sacred duty, its God-given purpose. Their very survival was an act of interpretation, connecting the ache in their bones and the fear in their hearts directly to the grace of their faith. We no longer fear the devil's breath in a draft, but we live in dread of an airborne virus, a silent, invisible killer that can be carried on the exhale of a stranger. We don't see God's anger in the lightning, but we feel a deep, gnawing terror about rogue code that can evaporate a life savings in an instant, or the slow, silent, inexorable creep of a changing climate that is undoing the world around us. We have meticulously replaced their superstitions with our anxieties, swapping demons for data and hexes for headlines. They look to you, their eyes wide with the terror that comes when a life they have built with their own bodies is about to be unmade by a slip of a scythe. You see their desperation. You see the filth in the poultice. And you know the truth you carry in your heart, the one you can never, ever speak aloud. You gently take the foul remedy from the mother's hand, setting it aside, not with scorn, but with a quiet authority that brooks no argument. Your voice is calm, a low current beneath the torrent of their panic. The young woman, the village whispered, was fey-touched, consumed by a wasting sickness in the peak of summer as the world around her burst with life. Her family brought you her favorite ribbon, believing a piece of her could anchor a healing spell. You boiled yarrow and feverfew, you made poultices of comfrey and recited the old words, but she simply dissolved. She became a story, a warning about vanity or straying too far into the woods at twilight. Your work is simply an extension of his will, using the tools he left lying in the fields and under the oaks. But to a man like Father Michael, whose power rests in sacraments and Latin, your knowledge might seem to come from a different source entirely. It smells of the old ways, of the pagan spirits his predecessors fought so hard to bury beneath their stone floors. He is the arbiter. He draws the line between a blessed remedy and a damnable spell. It also makes you a threat. A boy, his face pale with a terror you know well, finds you by the stream. His father's leg, gashed open by a clumsy axe swing, will not stop weeping blood. He doesn't run to the priest for a prayer. He runs to you for a miracle of a different sort. You follow him back to their hut, the smell of iron and fear thick in the air. You don't speak of saints or relics. You speak of cleanliness, of pressure, of the powdered moss you carry in a leather pouch. It is the conviction that God himself, in his mercy, embedded a map to healing within the very shape, color, and texture of his creation. This was not ignorance. It was a desperate, beautiful attempt to find order and meaning in a frightening, capricious world. It was a system of absolute faith applied to biology. When the village priest spoke of God's plan, this is what he meant. Not just a plan for your soul in the next life, but a plan for your body in this one. Today, we have microbiology and chemistry. Or is the ritual itself the only shield you have against the madness of helplessness? Centuries pass. The thatched roof becomes tile, then slate, then asphalt shingle. The dirt floor is covered by wood, then vinyl, then polished concrete. But the fear of the unseen has not vanished. It has simply changed its name. We no longer blame a witch's curse for a spoiled pot of milk, but we are haunted by the thought of microscopic carcinogens lurking in our food, invisible poisons we willingly ingest. Section 14. The unspoken truth. The gash in the boy's leg is a grim, open mouth, weeping blood and threatening a fever that could steal him before the next church bell rings. His father, a man whose hands are more familiar with an axe handle than a prayer book, stands helpless, his face a mask of primal fear. The boy's mother clutches a dirty poultice of river mud and cow dung, whispering to Saint Roch that this is all they have. You see the clean cloths you brought, stained with the bloody signature of his final cough. His sons looked at you with a desperate hope that curdled, day by day, into quiet accusation. You had no cure for the rot in his lungs, no prayer that could stop the harvest his body was reaping on itself. Faith in St. Giles, patron of the afflicted, did not stop the bleeding. Your knowledge was just a series of gentle gestures against a brutal certainty. And then there is Elara. A priest's prayer is the sanctioned petition for that grace. But what you did last night, that was different. The poultice of yarrow and crushed plantain was a gift of the earth. The incantation you whispered over the child's sleeping form was a thread spun from your grandmother's memory, a charm older than the church bells. This is the treacherous space you inhabit. In your heart, you believe the forest is God's other church, its remedies, his forgotten scripture. It is the sharp, clean scent of yarrow that can stop a man's bleeding after a feud over a stray sheep. It is the bitter tea of willow bark that cools a child's fever in the long, dark nights of winter. It is the precise pressure of a thumb on a woman's back as she screams a new soul into the world. You are the keeper of the village's collective memory of survival, the things that happen in the hay-strewn birthing bed and the quiet, shadowed sick room. The things that truly matter. This makes you indispensable. A few feet away, a patch of eyebright, its tiny white flower marked with a purple and yellow pattern that perfectly resembles a bloodshot, weary eye. You gather it gently. For the old weaver whose sight is failing, this is not a plant. It is a prayer made tangible. This is the doctrine of signatures, a profound belief that the world is not a random chaos of roots and leaves, but a divine text waiting to be read. When your son sweats with fever, you see it not as his body fighting, but as a battle for his soul being waged within his very blood. Your herbs and muttered rituals are the only weapons you have. You hang dried yarrow over his cot and burn a sprig of rosemary to cleanse the room. These are not cures, they are exorcisms. They are a desperate human attempt to impose order and will on a world of terrifying, random mystery. When the enemy has no face, is any weapon truly foolish? They are in our DNA, the silent testament of ancestors who were strong enough, or clever enough, or simply lucky enough to survive. They had no legacy carved in stone, but every seed they planted, every prayer they whispered in terror, built the world we now take for granted. They are the roots of our tree, hidden deep in the dark earth of the past, still feeding us in ways we may never fully comprehend. You remember the father, a blacksmith with hands that could bend iron, staring at his own useless palms. You remember the mother's cry, a sound that ripped the air and left a silence more profound than any before it. You had wrapped the child in your own cleanest linen, a futile gesture against the final, indifferent cold. You walk past old Amon's cottage, and you don't see the new family living there. You see him, propped by the hearth. The herbs you gave him, untouched on the table. His face is 100 paces away, but you feel his gaze on you like a physical weight. It is not the warm look of a grateful pastor whose flock has been spared. It is not the cold glare of an accuser. It is nothing. It is unreadable. And that is the most terrifying thing of all. You know what he is thinking, because it is the thought that beats like a second, frantic heart in your own chest. The church, his church, teaches that all life, all healing, all suffering flows from the will of God. The damp earth breathes a secret language against your palms. Here, in the quiet chaos of the woods, is your library. Not of vellum and ink, but of root and leaf. The men of God and learning hoard their knowledge in Latin, behind cold stone walls and the authority of a distant pope. Their words are meant to be eternal, monumental. Yours are meant to be alive. Your knowledge lives on your tongue, a chain of whispers, passed from your mother, and her mother before her. Your eyes, sharp from a lifetime of this search, scan the damp earth, and there, you let out a breath you didn't realize you were holding. Lungwort. You kneel, your fingers tracing its broad, spotted leaves. They look exactly like a diseased lung, pitted and marked by sickness. It is not a coincidence. It cannot be. It is a sign, a clear and deliberate mark left by the Creator to show you its purpose. This is God's hidden signature. Every shadow holds a potential shape, every gust of wind a possible voice. The world is thin, and the membrane between your reality and 1,000 terrible others is frighteningly permeable. Sickness is the greatest of these invisible enemies. It is a specter that slips through the door without a sound. It is not a matter of humors or bad air, not really. In your heart, you know it is a punishment, a demonic trial, or a foul hex laid upon your house. We press a button, and light appears. They understood the patient labor of felling a tree, seasoning the wood, rendering the tallow, and guarding the flame. By walking in their shoes, we are reminded that for every convenience we have gained, a skill has been lost. For every freedom we enjoy, a certainty, even a terrifying one, has been surrendered. And what still remains of them? More than you think. They are in the rhythm of our holidays, the ghosts of their planting and harvest festivals. They are in our language, in phrases and superstitions whose origins are buried in their soil. This is the story they tell, the one that keeps their faith in you and your faith in yourself from splintering like dry wood. It is a necessary fiction, but for every child like Thomas's daughter, there are others. For every victory, a ghost is born. You carry their faces with you, etched into the quiet moments after the work is done. They come to you not in dreams, but in the mundane. A patch of bluebells by the river reminds you of the baby born silent and the color of dusk. A tiny, perfect body that never drew a breath. The next morning, the air is thin and cold, tasting of damp earth and the memory of last night's fear. The fever has broken. In the quiet of your small cottage, the child's breathing is finally even, a soft rhythm against the silence. You step outside, your bare feet pressing into the cold mud, and a stillness catches you. He is there, across the small trodden green, standing in the dark archway of the parish church, is Father Michael. He is as motionless as the stone that frames him, a figure carved from shadow and wool. So, ask yourself, was there belief that a demon could hide in a fever so different from our own understanding of an invisible virus, a hostile entity that invades our cells? They sought to expel a spiritual invader. We seek to destroy a biological one. When faced with the abyss of our own mortality, have we ever truly stopped believing the body and soul are one? The cold seeps through the thin wool of your tunic, a familiar morning ghost clinging to your bones. Before you, the world is still a rumor, sketched in shades of gray and silver. As you walk through the pre-dawn mist, your mind sorts through the forest's pharmacy, a silent litany of need and hope. Your neighbor's youngest son is burning with fever, his breath a shallow rasp that sounds too much like the death rattle of a lamb born in a hard winter. You must find something. You cannot return empty-handed. Or was it a curse, a shard of malice sent through the air to poison your food, to sicken your children? Life in your time is governed by the unseen. It is a world of hostile whispers and malevolent intentions that ride on the air itself. You fear the devil's breath in a sudden draft that makes the candle flicker, a shiver that is more than just cold. You see divine anger in the violent crack of a lightning storm, a cosmic tantrum that could just as easily strike your hovel as the old oak on the hill. A man who could read the clouds and feel a change in the wind was not simple. He was a meteorologist whose skill meant the difference between a full barn and a winter of starvation. They lived in a state of constant, intimate dialogue with their environment, a conversation we have long since abandoned for the monologue of technology. What do we gain when we study these ordinary vanished people? We gain a measure of humility. We are forced to confront our own fragility, to see how utterly dependent we are on systems we barely understand. The scent of wood smoke and relief still clings to your clothes. Thomas pressed a small, warm loaf of bread into your hands, his eyes wet with a gratitude that feels heavier than a bag of coin. His daughter, pink and screaming, is a testament to your skill, a victory. The village sees the life you saved, the fever you broke, the future you secured. They see the miracle worker, the one who stands between them and the grasping dark. Ask yourself, when you are the only hope, what does it feel like to know you are not enough? This duality, this need to mend two worlds at once, has not vanished with the centuries. Even in our secular age of steel and science, when a doctor delivers a terrifying diagnosis, we find ourselves echoing your actions. We accept the chemotherapy, the radiation, the surgeon's sterile blade. But then, in the quiet of our fear, we seek something more. We find comfort in prayer, in meditation, in the simple ritual of lighting a candle against the darkness. We still seek to heal the spirit when the body is under siege. In a world that fears what it cannot see and trusts only what is sanctioned by the church bell, your simple basket of weeds and roots represents a fragile, dangerous kind of power. It begs the question, which is the truer act of faith? To trust in a prayer sent to a distant heaven, or to trust the leaf that grows at your feet, a quiet, hidden answer placed there by the same Creator. The milk has curdled. You stand over the small iron pot, the scent of sour whey catching in your throat. It was fresh this morning, drawn from the cow yourself, but now it is a lumpy, useless mess. It is not simply spoiled. Nothing is ever simply anything. You feel a prickle of cold on your arms, though the hearth is still warm. You think of Elspeth, the widow from the edge of the village, how she looked at you yesterday when you refused her a bit of bread. Was it a glance? It is to miss the profound, intricate, and deeply intelligent ways they survived in a world that we, for all our progress, would find unlivable. The timeless takeaway is this: they possessed a different kind of genius. Not the genius of invention or rapid progress, but the genius of resilience, of observation, of deep, ingrained knowledge of their immediate world. A woman who could identify 200 plants by sight and smell was not ignorant. She was a botanist, a pharmacist, a doctor. It is a feeling that knows no century, a triumph that links you to every healer, every doctor, every caregiver across time who has ever felt that ferocious, quiet joy when a life they fought for is given back. When it fails, the blame is diffused, scattered among specialists, protocols, insurance, and the sheer, unknowable will of the disease itself. But you stand alone with your basket of dried leaves and twisted roots, facing the absolute, unscalable wall at the edge of what you know. And when you fail, you will fail in the open. The entire village, the blacksmith, the reeve's wife, the children who play by the stream, will be your witness. They will see the body carried out. They will hear the wailing, and they will look at you, their eyes holding a new and terrible question. But the villagers, huddled in their fear, do not care for these theological boundaries. They have prayed to the saints. They have lit candles. And still, the child fades. Now they turn to you. They don't see heresy. They see hope. They just want their child to live through the night. This is the melancholy paradox of your life. Your skill is both a blessing and a curse. To be successful is to be sought after, but to be too successful is to be feared, to be whispered about as someone who traffics with forces best left alone. If he lives, you are a blessing. If he dies, you are a curse. You don't hesitate. You work. You burn the rosemary first, letting the smoke fill the cramped space, a prayer made of scent. Then, with your mother's voice a murmur in your mind, you mix the goose fat with crushed comfrey root. You clean the wound, not with learned theory, but with a knowledge of what soothes and what angers the flesh. You bind it with the soft linen. You leave the willow bark with the wife. Your instructions a quiet counter-melody to the man's fevered groans. A future of sleepless nights, of impossible choices, of walking the razor's edge between healer and witch has just begun. It is the ancient human chain of mentorship, the passing of a sacred flame from one set of hands to the next, ensuring that survival here in this harsh and beautiful world is never left entirely to chance. When you are gone, will it pass on? Or will this entire library burn to the ground, leaving only silence and a patch of forgotten green? We look back at them across a chasm of 800 years and see superstition, filth, and hardship. And we are not wrong. Their lives were, by our standards, impossibly brutal. They were hostages to the sky, to the rain, to the whims of a microbe or a nobleman. But to see only the darkness is to miss the light entirely. This is purpose made real. A harvest of breath and life wrested from the cold, indifferent soil of fate. Was it your herbs or their prayers that turned the tide? Does it matter? Faith is the vessel, but knowledge is the water that fills it. You are a conduit for a power older than parish priests, a magic rooted, not in saints, but in survival. There is no learned physician to summon from a distant city, no second opinion from a neighboring healer. To ask for one would be to admit your own inadequacy, a weakness the village will not soon forget. There is only the priest, and his arrival is not for healing the body, but for saving the soul. His presence is the tolling of a bell, signifying that your time is done. The failure is yours, and yours alone. We are insulated from this today. We live within a vast, complex cathedral of medicine. He believes your ancient words and earthborn remedies are a usurpation of his spiritual authority, a practice that smells of witchcraft. For him, the soul is the exclusive domain of the Church, to be ministered to with Latin rites, holy water, and the intercession of saints. Your knowledge is a wild, untamed thing, a relic of a pagan darkness the church bells have tried to ring away for centuries. He doesn't see a healer, he sees a rival. A quiet, insidious challenge to the order of things. This knowledge is a stark contrast to the rigid, impenetrable Latin of the priests or the theoretical humors discussed in distant universities. Theirs is a knowledge of the page. Yours is a science of the soil, an almanac of survival written in the language of seasons and symptoms, of mud and moonlight. You arrive at the small, smoky hut. The man inside has a woodsman's wound, a deep gash from a slipped axe, now weeping and radiating a damning heat. The family looks at you with a desperate hope that could curdle into accusation in a heartbeat. Ask yourself, is this a gift you are giving her or a terrible burden? To place the weight of 100 future heartaches onto shoulders so small and frail? You break off a leaf of comfrey and hold it out to her. Here, you say, crush this in your fingers. Tell me what it feels like. Tell me what it smells like. Forget the name. Remember the plant. Mara takes it without hesitation. Her small fingers work the rough, hairy leaf, her face a mask of concentration. The ritual itself is a form of respect, a way of focusing the mind and honoring the power you are about to unearth. This intimate encyclopedic knowledge of your environment is a bond of mutual dependence, a symbiotic connection almost unimaginable to the modern mind. The forest is your pharmacy, your larder, your sanctuary. This wisdom is your true wealth, a treasure more precious than any lord's silver. But here is the melancholy of it all. It is a treasure that cannot be written down. It lives only in your mind, your hands, your senses. It is not the mended cloak hanging by your door, nor the promise of a basket of eggs when the hens start laying again. It is this sacred, unspoken truth, the profound, bone-deep satisfaction of having stared into the maw of the shadow and forced it to retreat. It is the validation of your mother's knowledge, and her mother's before her, a chain of whispers, of herbs gathered under a certain moon, of poultices that stink of the earth, but pull the fire from the blood. The thought is a cold knot in your stomach, tightening with every ragged breath from the sickbed. What if the incantation you spoke over the mallow root was missing a word? What if your own unconfessed sin from last market day has soured the remedy, turning a cure into a poison? This is the terrible, silent burden you carry, the finality of your knowledge. When your remedies fail, there is no one else to turn to. They are God's physical mercy, a tangible medicine to seal the wound and draw out the heat. But the charms, the whispered words passed down from your grandmother and hers before her, they are for the soul. They are meant to coax the frightened spirit back from the edge of the abyss, to soothe it, and to persuade the invading entity that this small body is an inhospitable home. The parish priest, Father Thomas, sees this as a dangerous trespass. A cough from the next cottage over isn't just a cough. It could be a demon trying to get in. Your greatest tool, however, is the one you cannot pack. It is the knowledge passed from your mother and her mother before her. A living chain of whispers, an inheritance of trial and brutal error. It is the memory of watching her hands crush yarrow leaves to staunch a bleeding nose, of remembering which mushrooms meant a swift death and which could be dried for the lean months of winter. It is more important than the fevers you have broken, the births you have aided, the wounds you have closed. It is an act of profound, almost desperate hope. It is a wager against the darkness, a belief that this village will endure, that there will be coughs in the night and birthing screams that turn to cries of joy, and the deep, abiding sorrows of loss, long after your own name is a forgotten whisper on the wind. And someone must be there to face them. It is a form of literacy we have almost entirely lost. We can navigate the blinding speed of a digital world, but we would starve in a forest full of food. You pass a thicket of willow, its branches weeping toward the stream. You peel a small strip of bark. Chewing on it will dull the throbbing of a headache, a gift from the tree itself. You know which roots must be dug under a full moon, less for any real magic, and more because tradition dictates it is when they are most potent. Thomas, the father, rises from a stool in the corner. His face is a roadmap of exhaustion, the hollows under his eyes dark as new plowed earth. He crosses the small space, and his hand, calloused and hard from the field, grips your arm. It is not a gesture of payment, but of pure, desperate connection. His eyes, red-rimmed and weary, are shining. "God bless you, Elara," he whispers, the words rough, fragile. "God bless you." And in this moment, the transaction is complete. The poultices have been applied. The prayers to St. Jude, patron of lost causes, have been murmured until your own lips are dry and chapped. Now, there is only the waiting, and in the waiting, a cold tide creeps in. It isn't just the damp seeping through the daub walls. It's a pestilence of the soul. Doubt. It begins as a whisper. What if you chose the wrong herb? The fever is a fire in the blood, but perhaps it was the yellow bile that was unbalanced, not the red. You should have used a purgative, not a coolant. The child's fever is not just a symptom. It is the heat of a demon's breath on his soul. Perhaps it slipped in through an unblessed sneeze, an open doorway for malice. Or maybe the illness is a penance, a punishment from God for some small forgotten sin, a stolen apple, a lie told in haste. The universe keeps a meticulous ledger of such things. Your healing, therefore, cannot be a simple affair. It must address both realms at once. The herbs, pulled from the earth under a waxing moon, are for the body. This is not for the sick, but for the terrified wife who watches him, for the child who cannot sleep for the sound of his father's pained breathing. And last, you take a sprig of fresh rosemary. Its pine-like sharpness is not for the body, but for the room itself. Sickness, you were taught, weakens the veil between worlds. It leaves a door ajar, and the rosemary is there to ward off the malevolent, unseen things that are drawn to the scent of suffering. It was given to you, a sacred trust, and you are merely its temporary guardian. It does not belong to you any more than the rain or the sun belongs to the soil. To let it turn to dust in the grave with you would be the greatest sin of all, a betrayal not against God, but against life itself. You must choose someone. The choice has been made for you. This act of transmission, you realize, is the most critical part of your work. You can read the rust-colored blight on a leaf and know to avoid the berries of that bush. You see the fine white web of a particular fungus and know that beneath the soil lies a mushroom that promises nourishment, unlike its cousin, the beautiful but deadly amanita, the liar in a pristine white cloak. That mushroom delivers not a meal, but a final, agonizing sermon. This knowledge was not learned in a school. It was passed down from your mother and her mother before her, a chain of whispers and practical demonstrations stretching back into a time before memory. By the hearth, her mother is a huddled shape. Her shoulders shake with silent sobs, a sound you have heard countless times. But you have learned to read the seasons of tears. These are not the bitter, hacking cries of grief that tear a soul apart. These are the tears of a dam breaking, the slow, steady weeping of relief that washes the grit of despair away. She does not look at you. Her gaze is fixed on the small, breathing mound under the blanket, a sight more holy than any cathedral icon. The last of the willow bark tea has been swallowed. The cooling cloths, steeped in vinegar and rosewater, have been laid upon the burning forehead for the 10th, or maybe the 20th time. You've lost count. The air in the small wattle and daub cottage is thick with the scent of boiled herbs, sweat, and something else, the thin, sharp smell of fear. You have done all you can. Every remedy passed down from your mother and her mother before her has been tried. You are preparing a poultice, a balm for the flesh, but you are also weaving a net of sound, a spiritual barricade to calm the terrified spirit you believe is trapped inside that small, feverish body. In your world, the body and the soul are not separate countries with a well-marked border. They are one and the same land. Sickness is not a simple matter of bad humors or tainted water. It is a spiritual crisis, a tear in the sacred veil that separates the living from the legion of things unseen. Beside it, you tuck the linen scraps, remnants of old shifts and shirts, washed in the river 100 times, until they are softer and more yielding than a noble lady's silks. They will not chafe the skin or anger a wound. You take a bundle of dried willow bark, brittle and gray. A man with a fever can chew this until his jaw aches, and slowly the fire in his blood will cool to embers. You add a small pouch of dried chamomile, its scent a sweet promise of calm. It is a quiet, hungry curiosity, the seed from which all wisdom grows. That is lady's mantle, you tell her, your voice low. It is for mothers when they are in pain. She nods slowly, her eyes never leaving the plant, as if committing its shape, its very essence, to memory. She asks about the rosemary, the lungwort, the borage that brings courage. Her questions are not childish whims. They are the questions of an apprentice. You know, with a certainty that settles deep in your bones, that your knowledge cannot die with you. Further in, beneath the dappled shade of an ancient oak, you see the gentle, shy head of a violet. Its flowers, steeped in hot water, Make a syrup that can soothe the harshest cough, like the one your youngest has been fighting since the last frost. You gather the blossoms with a careful hand, leaving more than you take. It is a law here, unspoken but absolute. The forest provides for you, and you, in turn, are its steward. You are a librarian in a library of living books. The child, a small body that has been a battlefield for unseen forces, is still. But this is not the stillness of surrender. You see it instantly. This is the profound quiet of a field after a long-sought rain. Her chest rises and falls with the deep, even rhythm of a winter sleeper. You place a hand on her brow, the skin no longer a burning parchment, but cool and damp with the sweat of a fever that has finally broken its siege. Her hair, matted with the struggle, clings to her temples. She is alive. She is returning. He is your future. His child's fate is the thread that will either strengthen your place in the village tapestry or leave you frayed and outcast at its edge. This is not a job. It is a sacrament of survival, and every soul is a witness. The grinding sound is a steady beat in the oppressive quiet, broken only by the shallow, ragged breaths coming from the small cot in the corner. As you work, you murmur. The words are not for the child's parents, who huddle by the dying embers of the hearth, their faces pale masks of desperation. The words are for the sickness itself. They are a mix of practical instruction for the herbs. Bind the flesh, cool the fire, and something far older. A low, rhythmic charm that sounds almost like a prayer, but a prayer the parish priest would not recognize. You don't reach for a physician's leather bag, polished and severe. You never will. Your hands, stained with berry juice and garden soil, find the familiar weight of a simple woven basket. Inside, the tools of your trade are not forged things of steel and sharpness, but gathered things of earth and patience. You check the small clay jar of goose fat, a greasy pale miracle that forms the base for every poultice you make. You look at her, truly look at her, and the years fall away like shed skins. You see not a child of 7 or 8 summers, but a reflection in a pool of water, distorted by time. You see yourself, standing in another garden, your own mother's hands, moving with this same sureness, this same reverence. You remember the fear and awe you felt, the burning need to understand the power that grew from the ground. Your mother saw it in you then, and you see it in Mara now. Each has a name, a purpose, a personality. There, pushing with stubborn courage through the hard-packed earth of the path, is the dandelion. The village wives mock it as a weed, but you know its leaves, picked before flowering, will make a bitter but cleansing tonic for the blood. You know its root, dried and roasted, can be brewed into a drink that eases the ache in your joints after a long day in the fields. You nod to it, a silent acknowledgement of its strength. The third day dawns not with fire, but with a cool, pearlescent gray. The air, for 2 suns thick with the heat of the forge and the scent of sickness, is finally thin and clean. It feels like the moment after a great bell has ceased its tolling, the silence a presence all its own. You push open the cottage door, a simple plank of wood that has felt like the gate to a tomb, and the change is immediate. It is no longer a fever box, a space sealed with prayer and dread. It is just a room again. Ask yourself, what is the true weight of such a system? We look back from our modern transactional society, where we pay for a service and the relationship is cleanly severed. We have gained an undeniable efficiency, a freedom from the burden of owing and being owed. But in that sterile exchange, perhaps we have lost something profound. We have forgotten the simple, terrifying truth that governed their lives, that a community's health depends not on individual transactions, but on a tangled network of shared reliance. Here, in this cramped and smoky cottage, Thomas the Weaver is not your client. Section 5. The Body and the Soul. The room smells of damp earth, smoke, and fear. You work by the unsteady light of a single tallow candle, its flame casting long, dancing shadows that make the corners of the small hut seem to breathe. Your hands, stained with green from the herbs, move with a practiced rhythm. With a smooth, heavy stone, you crush comfrey root and yarrow leaves into a dark, fragrant paste inside a wooden bowl. Ask yourself, is this a choice or a condemnation? To be the one everyone turns to when prayers fail, to hold life and death in hands that are only ever thanked in whispers or blamed in shouts. You are their living superstition, their hedge against the dark. And as you gather your linen pouch of herbs, the tools of your precarious trade, you know the truth. You are not a healer. You are simply the last person they ask for help before they begin digging the grave. She stops beside the cluster of lady's mantle, its cupped leaves holding perfect globes of morning dew, each one a tiny, shimmering world. The other children believe these dewdrops are fairy tears. They are told it is a plant of the Virgin, blessed and pure. You know its secret name is Alchemilla, the little alchemist, because it can bind a wound and quell a woman's bleeding after birth. Mara does not ask about fairies. She points a small, dirt-streaked finger. Why that one? She whispers, her voice barely a breath. Its leaves are like a cloak. It is cooler here, cleaner, thick with the smell of damp earth, decaying leaves, and the sharp, green scent of pine. This is not a chore. It is a pilgrimage. You leave behind the world of men, the gossip of the village, the judgment of the priest, the endless toil of the fields, and you enter a kingdom where you are not a peasant, but a scholar, a quiet sovereign of this domain. You walk with a slow, deliberate pace, your eyes scanning the undergrowth, not as a blanket of green, but as a dense, living tapestry of individual threads. Ask yourself, when your own soul is a story told only by others, a mosaic of 1,000 different hopes and judgments, what is left of you when you are finally alone? Does the saint, the sinner, the healer, or the curse follow you home? Or is there only the silence where a person used to be? You pull your cloak tighter, the village now behind you, and head toward the whispering quiet of the woods, where the trees, at least, ask for nothing. But if she worsens, if the light in her eyes flickers and dies, whispers will follow you home like shadows. They will say you used the wrong herbs, that your prayers were hollow, that perhaps your presence itself is an ill omen. In this small, interconnected world, your worth is not measured by the weight of your purse, but by your perceived usefulness and the community's fragile faith in you. Every birth you attend, every wound you stitch, is a public entry in a ledger that exists only in memory and gossip. You know this not from a book, but from the smell in the air and the heat on your hand. Was their knowledge less true for its lack of data? Or was it simply a different kind of truth, one we can no longer speak or even comprehend? And then there is you. You are the village's memory of what to do when the body fails. You are their fragile shield against the inevitable. This is the core of your existence. You are not a person of power, but a vessel of necessity. The weight of his hope is heavier and more suffocating than the damp night air. In an age where a simple cough could be a death sentence, a tolling bell for a life barely lived. You are the one who is expected to stand in the doorway of the sick room and bargain with fate itself. But every time we reach out to comfort another in the dark, we are finishing the work they began. Not the sky, not the bees, not the world at large. She watches your hands. She watches how you pinch a dead leaf from the thyme, how you test the soil for moisture, how you tie the climbing beans to their poles with twists of straw. There is an unnerving intensity in her gaze, a focused quiet that feels ancient. Today, she takes a step, then another. Her bare feet make no sound on the packed earth as she enters your domain. A mind that saw God in a sunset and a demon in a spoiled batch of milk. If you love immersive, real storytelling about survival, belief, and forgotten lives, hit like and subscribe. It helps more than you know. Drop a comment with the medieval fact that surprised you most, or what role you think you'd play if you were born in the year 1287. Let's begin and live the life they never got to finish. You step from the cramped, smoky darkness of your wattle and daub home into the cathedral of the forest. The air changes instantly. They need the work of your hands, but they fear what you represent. The terrifyingly thin veil between a swaddled babe and a burial shroud. This is the profound, unsettling nature of their reliance. They believe your knowledge of herbs is a gift, but they also suspect it is a pact. They will call for you in the deepest, most desperate night, but they will not share their bread with you at the midday meal. You are a tool to be used, a symbol to be invoked, but you are not truly one of them. Your entire practice is built on this complex web of barter, favors, and mutual obligation. You are not a merchant selling a cure. You are a neighbor investing your skill. The true payment you work for is your reputation. It is a currency of trust, more valuable and far more volatile than gold. If this child recovers, if her fever breaks like a spring thaw, your standing in this small world grows. Your name will be a comfort, a charm spoken over sickbeds. The healer had to become a finely tuned machine of perception, a living instrument calibrated by a lifetime of births, sicknesses, and deaths. We have traded this intimate, human-centered art for the cold precision of technology. Our doctors read screens and lab reports, often from a distance, translating a patient's life into a language of numbers. They are no less skilled, but the nature of their perception has been fundamentally altered. You see the child, and you know the humors are in a state of war. The blood and phlegm locked in a battle. Her small body cannot win. His eyes are wide with the primal fear of a parent watching their child's life unravel thread by thread. In this moment, he doesn't see you as Elara, the woman who lives alone at the edge of the village, the one they whisper about when they think you cannot hear. He sees you as his only hope, a final barrier against the abyss. In this world, there is no physician from a distant city, no university-trained man of medicine to be summoned with a pouch of silver. There is only God and the priest who speaks for him. We search for a wise woman or wise man in the form of a specialist with a gentle bedside manner, a therapist who can translate our fears into words, a trusted friend who knows when to speak and when to simply sit with us in the silence. We still search for a human touch in the cold calculus of biology. Humanity has always lived this way, one hand holding a remedy, the other a prayer, standing in the fragile space between the soil and the stars. Their hands are gone, crumbled to dust beneath the churchyard stones. This small patch of ground, fenced off from the roaming goats and careless feet of the village, is a library of survival. It is an arsenal, and it is your life's work. You've noticed the girl for weeks. While the other children's shrieks and laughter punctuate the afternoon, a chaotic music of fleeting joy, she remains apart. Her name is Mara. She does not run or chase hoops. She does not join the rough-and-tumble games by the stream. She stands by the low stone wall, a small, still figure, and she watches. This is Sleepy History, where we listen for the whispers, not the proclamations. We look for the meaning in the rituals they performed, not out of foolishness, but out of a desperate need to impose order on a world of chaos. We'll learn how fear of the devil shaped the architecture of a church, and how the fear of starvation shaped the soul of a community. This is an exercise in empathy, an attempt to inhabit a mind so alien and yet so fundamentally human. In a life without mirrors, your identity is not forged in the privacy of self-reflection. It is assembled, piece by jagged piece, from the reflections you see in the eyes of others. To the priest, you are a necessary woman who dabbles in things best left to God. To the children, a figure of whispered stories, half witch, half saint. To the desperate, you are hope. To the grieving, you are a curse. You are set apart not by walls, but by what you know and what you have seen. The silver pennies that pass through the village are for taxes and tithes, phantom coins that are spoken of more than seen. His payment, your payment, will come later, in a language older than currency. It will be a share of grain after the harvest, when the scythes have sung their song. It might be a mended cloak for the coming winter, its seams stitched with a craftsman's gratitude. Perhaps it will be a dozen eggs when his hens are laying well, each one a small, perfect promise. You look at the color of her own skin, a waxy yellow that speaks of a failing liver. You gently pull down her eyelid to see the whites of her eyes, now tinged with the same sickly hue. You look at the thick, white coating on her tongue. These are your charts, your readouts, your data points. In a time without instruments, diagnosis was an art of extreme observation. It was a full-body experience, a total sensory immersion into the landscape of another's suffering. For the love of God, Elara, wake up. It is Thomas, the weaver. You knew it would be. His youngest, a girl of 4 with hair the color of harvested wheat, has been wrestling with a fever for 2 days. A summer sickness, they call it. A simple phrase for the quiet thief that steals the breath from small bodies. You unlatch the heavy oak door, opening it just enough to see his face, a pale, rain-streaked mask in the thin moonlight. We have built sterile white hospitals to hold our sick, vast cathedrals of science filled with machines that beep and hum, charting the body's slow decline or sudden, miraculous recovery. We have pushed death out of the home, hiding it behind the closed doors of an intensive care unit, making it a professional and antiseptic affair. But look closer. Have we truly evolved, or have we just rebranded survival? We still search for someone to explain the unexplainable, to offer comfort when science has reached its limit and the charts offer no more answers. The sun bakes the back of your neck, and the scent of crushed mint and damp earth rises from the beds around you. Your knuckles are stained green, your fingernails packed with the dark, rich soil that gives and takes in equal measure. Each plant here is a word in a silent language you have spent a lifetime learning. Comfrey, for the setting of a bone, its coarse leaves a promise of mending. Yarrow, the soldier's woundwort, to staunch the flow of blood. The delicate white flowers of feverfew, a fragile weapon against the hammering torment in a man's skull. It's a story written in mud and smoke, in the quiet rhythm of a scythe through wheat, and the low chant of a prayer against the coming winter. We are going to walk in the footsteps of the forgotten. The 99% who lived and died without ever having their name carved in stone. We are going to feel the gnawing hunger of a failed harvest, the cold terror of a fever in a world without medicine, and the strange, fierce beauty of a life bound to the seasons. You know it is John, the weaver. You see his wife's face instead, pale and slick with the sweat of a labor that would not end. In his averted gaze, you are not a healer. You are a harbinger of death, a living monument to his failure, and perhaps, in his darkest whispers, your own. You are a walking record of the village's joys and sorrows, an open ledger where every birth and every death is tallied. This is your truth in a world that has never shown you your own face. The loom in the corner of the cottage stands silent, a wooden skeleton waiting for its master. But Thomas, the weaver, does not work. He watches you, his eyes missing nothing as you check on his daughter, her breath a shallow whisper in the gloom. He is a man whose entire life is measured in the patient crossing of threads, in the slow creation of substance from nothing. But he will not pay you in coin for this. He has none to spare. You are not listening for a heartbeat, but for the quality of the breath itself. Is it shallow, like a bird's? Or is it a wet, rattling sound, the sound of a swamp in her lungs, a tide of sickness rising? This is your second tool, your hearing. You lay your hand on her forehead, not with a thermometer, but with a palm that has measured the heat of 100 fevers, that knows the difference between the dry fire of infection and the damp warmth of a passing ague. This skin is a parchment telling a terrible story. You don't need light to see the shape of your one-room world. The rough-hewn table still sticky with spilled ale, the clay pots holding the dried and powdered hopes of the earth, the bundles of yarrow and feverfew hanging from the soot-blackened ceiling beams like sleeping bats. Their faint, dusty scent is the room's only perfume, a dry promise of relief that tastes like chalk on the back of your tongue. Another series of knocks, louder this time, a frantic staccato that splinters the silence. It is accompanied by a man's choked sob, a sound stripped of all pride. Elara, you offered a warm hand when the fever shakes began. You brewed a bitter tea to quell the churning gut. You spoke a quiet prayer when the last rites were given too soon. You offered a sliver of hope, not of immortality, but of a less lonely, less terrifying passage. You provided a human presence in the face of the inhumanly vast unknown. This, you realize with a clarity that only age can bring, has always been the healer's true role. It was never about conquering death, but about championing life right up to the very edge of it. This humble secret is the foundation of so much that passes from medicine. Before the alchemist's grand theories or the physician's Latin texts, The greatest tool a healer had was the ability to create the right conditions, both physical and psychological, for nature to do its work. You are a tender of the human garden, weeding out fear so that life has room to grow. Ask yourself, when a soul is convinced it is cursed, can the body heal without first lifting that curse? Or is the truest magic simply knowing which fears to soothe and which truths to keep silent? A rat scuttles over your feet in the dark, and you don't flinch. It is as much a part of this house as you are. You've never seen a toothbrush. You believe demons live in fog. Your town blames goats for the plague. Welcome to the Middle Ages. This isn't a story of kings or of knights in shining armor. There are no grand battles here, no tapestries woven with gold thread. This is a story of the dark spaces between the history you know. You remember her son, a year gone now, his leg torn open by a boar's tusk. You remember the searing iron, the boy's scream, and the poultice of comfrey you prayed would hold back the rot. In her eyes today, you see the reflection of a miracle worker, a vessel of God's own mercy. Her silent thanks is a brief, warm hearth in the chill air. But a few steps further, a man working a tallow candle mold turns his back on you, his shoulders a hard, unforgiving line. You do not need to see his face. This is the central, unspoken war of your world. Not a war of kings and castles, but a war over who owns truth. Is it the man who reads of miracles in a dead language, or the woman who performs them with a living plant? Ask yourself, when your knowledge is your only currency, but also the very evidence that could be used to condemn you, how do you choose when to use it? Do you let the man bleed to death to protect yourself? Or do you save him and risk the fire? This is your first diagnostic tool, your nose. It tells you death has already been in this room and is wondering whether to stay. Your eyes adjust to the gloom. The weaver and his wife are shadows huddled by the hearth, their faces masks of sleepless dread. On a low cot, their daughter lies still. She is the epicenter of this silence. You kneel, ignoring the parents for now. Their fear is a bell that never stops ringing. You must listen for the quieter sounds. You lean close to the child, your ear hovering over her small mouth. You listen. The fire in your hearth has died to a pile of pale, sleeping ash, and the deep cold of the damp earth floor seeps through the straw pallet. A familiar ache that settles deep into your bones. It feels like the memory of winter, even now, in the heart of a wet summer. You rise without a sound, a wraith in your own home. Your bare feet find their way in the absolute darkness, knowing the small geography of your life by heart. You see the pale smoke rising from the wattle and daub chimneys, a faint pulse against the gray sky. It is a sign of life, of warmth, of continuity, a sign that for one more day the hearths are lit. You have been this village's anchor in the relentless storm of mortality. Your life has been a long vigil at the boundary of the known world. You did not banish death. No one can do that. The Black Death taught everyone that lesson. A brutal sermon preached in whispers and rattling coughs. But you stood at the threshold and argued. While you work, you murmur an old charm, a string of half-forgotten words about alderbark and the turning of the tide. The words are for them, not for the wound. They are a balm for the terror in their hearts. The charms provide hope, and hope is its own powerful medicine. You are, in essence, a practitioner of applied common sense, a master of the placebo effect, centuries before such terms existed. You are facilitating the body's own incredible resilience, its deep, primal memory of how to mend itself. This emotional burden is the timeless, unspoken price paid by all who work on the front lines of human suffering. From a medieval healer with a basket of herbs to a modern doctor in a sterile room, the ghosts just change their names. The heavy wooden door groans shut behind you, and the scent of yarrow and wood smoke gives way to the damp, earthy smell of the lane. Sunlight, thin and pale as watered milk, cuts through the morning mist, and for a moment, the world is quiet. But as you walk, you feel it begin, the community's gaze. It is a physical weight, 100 invisible threads pulling at your cloak. A woman, her hands stained with dye from her morning's work, stops and offers a deep, grateful nod. A ghost of a smile touches your own lips. If you can mend flesh, can you not also blight the crops or sour the milk? Your identity is a tightrope walk over a chasm of fear. On one side, you are the wise woman, a pillar of the community. On the other, the witch, a vessel for the devil's work. There is no middle ground. Every successful birth is a testament to your skill, but it is also one more entry in a silent indictment, a record of power that is unsanctioned, female. And rooted in the soil, they both revere and fear. You duck under the low lintel of the weaver's cottage, and the world outside vanishes. The air inside is a physical thing, thick and heavy in your lungs. It's a tapestry of smells woven together. The damp earthen floor, the ghosts of 1,000 meals cooked over the hearth, the ever-present sting of wood smoke that clings to everything. But underneath it all is the reason you were summoned. It's the sharp, metallic scent of a high fever, a smell like hot iron plunged into water, and something else, the sweet, cloying odor of decay. The sound that wakes you isn't the wind, or a restless animal scratching at the wattle and daub. It is a fist on your cottage door, a frantic, desperate rhythm that speaks of a terror older than the stones of the church. You are already awake, of course. Sleep is a fleeting visitor, a luxury for those whose minds are not a library of remembered suffering, each spine a different fever, each page a failed birth.